A striking new graphic from mining.com and the Northern Miner reveals how the global balance of power is shifting, not just over raw copper, but over the ability to process it. The chart shows China now commands over half the world's copper processing capacity, outpacing American allies and other global players by a wide margin. I spoke to Anthony Vaccaro, the president of the Northern Miner Group, to explain the story behind this powerful visual, why it matters to investors, and where the next fractures in global supply chains could emerge.
When we were looking at extraction, turns out that the US sphere has about 50% of the copper that's being pulled out of the ground. It's being pulled out of the ground in the US sphere. That includes America and South America, of course, Chile, Peru being two of the most predominant ones. Now we're turning into processing, and China at that time for copper extraction, China was roughly 30%. But that's because of the important forays China has made in the central part of Africa and the African copper belt. We align that as part of the Chinese sphere. Now we move into copper processing, and the story completely flips, right? As you said, China's at 53%. USA isn't even the second. The second would be the coalition of the willing, because in a world where these spheres are becoming more important, China, Russia, America being the predominant ones, and the prognosticators in this case, it's hard to see why Canada, Western Europe, Korea, and Japan, that all have strong economies and a big marketplace, why they would want to go along with that. So if we would have done this infographic back in the, say, 20 years ago, at the extraction one, we wouldn't have put the Congo and Zambia with China. They would have been undrafted. But China realized the importance of the copper resources there, made concerted and consistent efforts in those countries, the Belt and Road Initiative, building infrastructure, creating those ties, where we felt, it's a judgment call, but where we felt, given those economic ties right now, those countries would more likely fit within the Chinese sphere. So similar thing is going on today with a place like India. Where is India going to fall within this? They have relations with the West, they have relations with China. I think nations like India, to continue with the example, are wise that at this point they're trying to play both sides and do what's best for their own country. At a certain point, though, our history tells us that it's hard to remain neutral. At a certain point, very often countries have to make a decision, and they got to see where they fall. When you see it this starkly put out before you, I think it's very clear that the West is going to be making a concerted effort going forward to build out copper refinery capacity and for processing capacity for all the critical minerals.